Studying cancer at Oxford has been one of the highlights of my academic career so far. Just to see all the efforts that are being made currently to advance patient care is truly motivating. You're at the forefront of that.
I always feel like I'm a part of this history. I'm following the footsteps of the countless great minds. I'm kind of contributing to the development of science around the world. There's a sense of belonging to me, and I think that matters most.
The mission of cancer science research in Oxford is to bring cutting-edge solutions to age-old problems.
With the technologies and the accumulated knowledge that we have, we are in a position to start developing things that are unprecedented.
Oxford's a brilliant place to come and study cancer because it's got a fantastic biomedical ethos. We've been the top medical school for over 10 years. What we do really changes things globally.
I did my master's in applied cancer science in the Department of Oncology. I wanted to have a personal contribution into future cancer therapies. The environment within the Department of Oncology is great. It's so open and collaborative.
The big breakthroughs in science are made by large teams working together, and interdisciplinary working is a key part of that.
There's so much freedom to research work at Oxford. You find a question and you realize, oh, I need this technique. You pitch it to your supervisor, they say go for it. The next day, you find yourself talking to somebody across the building who's been doing that for decades. I literally found no limit to what kind of people and techniques I could explore.
You can't be an expert in everything, but the fantastic thing about being in Oxford is there is an expert in everything somewhere in the city.
I'm currently a DPhil student in the Department of Oncology. When I was doing bioinformatics analysis, I might be stuck at one point. I always get help from postdocs in our lab, and they always provide me with hints about what to do, but we also discuss the cultures, the daily lives.
Coming to Oxford as an international student was an incredibly liberating experience. There's things to do, things to discover every month of the year. I've cycled through societies, hobbies, and I haven't found a limit yet.
The city of Oxford is beautiful. It has so much history. It's amazing to be walking the streets and know that Nobel Prize winners have walked the same streets as you. It's really inspiring.
It strikes a balance between peacefulness of green space and the bustling city life.
Our students have gone on to all sorts of different careers. Obviously there's the classical academic pathway with postdoc appointments, but also there's industry, which there are many around Oxford, and then there are all sorts of additional technical and contract research organisations that support this ecosystem and are really satisfying career destinations in their own right.
I think Oxford has opened a lot of doors, both academically and personally for me, and I've been able to grab those chances. And I think through that and meeting other people from all corners of the earth has really widened my perspective.
Coming to Oxford was an opportunity to grow. The world is open for you.